For those of you that follow this channel, you know that I have been highly critical of the products that Fujifilm has recently released, specifically the X-H2S. I haven't done anything about the X-H2, and honestly, I think that camera is actually a much better value than the X-H2S, but that is not what we're going to talk about in today's video. Today, we're going to talk about why I decided to make the switch from Fujifilm over to... Now, I know there's a ton of videos out there about this particular topic, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I think I have a fairly interesting perspective in that I've shot with Fujifilm now for, I want to say, six years or so. 2016, I want to say, is when I got the XT1. And since then, I've had the XT2, the XT3, the XT4, the X100F. I still have the X100V, and you are going to have to pry that out of my cold, dead hands. I've had the XT20 and just countless lenses, 60 to 55, the 18 to 55, the 23 f2, the 35 f2, the 55 to 200, the 32 f1.8 Zeiss 2it lens, which I actually still have. My point is I've got a lot of experience using Fujifilm products. And what has happened over the past 3 or 4 years is that my needs have changed, and Fujifilm just unfortunately hasn't kept up with my needs. Now, I probably have been overly critical of these product offerings, these new product offerings, because they don't cater to my needs, right? And I have to understand and come to grips with the fact that, you know, Fujifilm isn't necessarily concerned about me. They have a business to run, and they're going to run it in the best way that they see fit. So I think, you know, the cameras that they're offering, they will appeal to some folks, but for me personally, they just don't excite me like cameras, like Fujifilm cameras in the past have. They're just going in a very different direction. And I think that's one of the things that I am saddest about, is that, you know, the use of the Fujifilm camera, those tactile controls, the command wheels that you can push in, the shutter speed on the top, the ISO, like the aperture rings, like all that stuff is what drew me to Fujifilm in the first place, and that is slowly but surely working its way out of their camera models. Now, they've said they're going to continue with the X-T5 with the manual controls. Remains to be seen. I trust them that they are going to do that, or else they would lose like even more customers. But anyways, the point of this video today is not to talk about Fujifilm, but instead it's to talk about some of the things that the new brand that I switched to, which is, drum roll please, Sony. Hey, who would have thunk? What a huge surprise. Nobody's ever done that before. Anyways, I went out a couple of months ago and I bought the Sony A7 IV along with the kit lens. Since then, I've purchased a number of other lenses. The one that I'm filming on right now is the 35mm f1.4 G Master, I think it's called. I picked up the 20 f1.8, which is a fantastic vlogging lens. I picked up a used Sigma 14-24 for my real estate work. And I also picked up this 70 to 200 f2.8 zoom lens. That it's the version 2, and it was literally dropped from the heavens. I mean, this thing is otherworldly. It does things I've never seen a lens do. All right, I'm rambling. Let's get into it. I've got 4 things that we're going to talk about in no particular order, but these are the things that I am really enjoying about the Sony ecosystem in general, and specifically this A7 IV. Let's do it. I'm trying to do a video. I love your kisses. I love your kisses, but I'm trying to do a video, and you're not helping things all that much. So the number one reason why I switched from Fuji to Sony has to do with eye autofocus. If you follow this channel, you know that eye autofocus has really been something that Fuji has struggled with, and Sony has seemed to nail. So even just video that I'm shooting right now, I'm sure it's focusing in on me. I hope it's focusing in on me, although I do have an animal in the picture, so maybe it's focusing on the animal. I don't know. I guess I see the box on my eye, so I'm assuming it's focusing on me. So anyways, I did a video on the XS10 that showed the performance of the eye autofocus. Now, that's the previous generation Fuji autofocus system. The new one for the X-H2 and the X-H2S looks much improved, but it is still not at the same level as, say, a Sony or a Canon camera. And the eye autofocus, I've had this in many different situations already, and it has been just absolutely spot on. It has not missed yet, which is incredible coming from Fuji, where it was fairly routine, where it would just find a face in the strangest places, whether it would be in the tree or in the bushes or a passing car or a rock wall. I mean, things would just identify themselves as a face within the Fuji algorithm. Again, I know it's been much improved, but I've seen some other videos out there from other folks where it is still hunting in certain situations. So it's something to consider, and that is really one of the primary reasons, because I'm filming like this where I'm actually on camera and I've got, the focus is on me. And if it's not on me, it's typically, if I've got it turned around, then it's going to be on someone else. For eye autofocus, there is nothing better than the Sony autofocus system. Get your butt down, you goofball. All right, let's go on to the next thing. Okay, the second reason, or the second thing that you need to be aware of when you're switching from Fuji to Sony, is you are immediately going to notice a difference in how Lightroom, if you use Lightroom, this is really pertinent to you, but how Lightroom handles the Sony RAW files as opposed to the Fuji RAW files. It is like night and day difference. For whatever reason, Adobe just does not like Fuji. So whenever you import a RAW image into Lightroom and then try to process it, really just starts to break down very, very quickly. Now, I'm assuming that's a feature of the Fuji RAW files and not necessarily because it's coming from an APS-C camera, although that may play into it as well. But all I know is that the RAW files that I pull into Lightroom from Sony, I can push and pull those files very easily, and they don't break down at all. Now, part of the reason I suspect is because this is the A7 IV. It's got a 33 megapixel sensor, and it is just awesome. I mean, the stills quality is incredible, and that's something that was like a side benefit. I purchased this camera primarily for the video features, but I started shooting some stills with it, and I was like, wow, this dynamic range is incredible. It has just tons of detail, and it's just a great all-around camera. And a little side note here, this is not really one of the things I wanted to talk about, but while we're talking about it, let's talk about the fact that this truly is a hybrid camera, and the new XH2 and the XH2S, they've got the PASM dials, but it's very difficult. I won't say very difficult, but it's a little bit more of a challenge to to switch from stills to movie mode, and I'm not quite sure why they got rid of that switch. It seemed so good on the X-T4, and all of a sudden they just got rid of it just to make some custom buttons on the one dial. I don't know. In general, I'm not real happy about the direction that Fuji is going with the lack of dials on the camera. That was one of the appeals of the cameras in the first place, was to have all of those dials, but it is what it is. So anyways, that is the second thing that I want to talk about, is the RAW files and how they perform in Lightroom compared to the Fuji RAW files. Okay, the third thing, Sasha, you are blocking my view again, or the people's view. All right. Anyways, the third thing that I want to talk about here has to do with value. So the new iterations of Fujifilm's flagship cameras is the XH2 and the XH2S. The XH2S is $2,500. For $2,500, it's the same price as the camera that I'm filming on right now, which is, again, the A7 IV. This is a full frame sensor. It's got Sony autofocus. Like, it's just insane the value that you get for $2,500 on this particular camera as opposed to the XH2S. Now, there are going to be some situations or some folks who use all of those features that are found in the XH2S and need those really fast readout speeds. I mean, that's important to their work. I'm not one of them. I mean, I'm literally kind of doing this, so it's really not super important for me. But if you need those additional codecs and you need all of that technology, I guess, then maybe it's a good value. But for the average person and the typical Fujifilm shooter, it's really overkill. It's not something that you necessarily need. And I would say, like, most of the really incredible stuff, the videos that I've seen, the type cinema type stuff that I've seen come out of the XH2S has all been manual focus. So again, for the average camera enthusiast like myself who shoots Fujifilm, this represents to me a much better value. Okay, and last here on my list is the fact that there is no auto exposure stepping on this camera whatsoever. So when I switch scenes, I know I talked about this a little earlier, but when I go from a scene where it's really, really bright and I go into something that's quite a bit darker, the transition from light to dark was just so smooth, and it did it automatically. So, you know, so many people out there, when you see situations like that, and people are like, look, you got to learn how to use your equipment. You should know how to, you know, adjust all these things and just make it work with your Fuji camera. I'm talking specifically. Like, that is just a bunch of BS. You know, you pay $2,500 for these cameras, you know, not so you can manually manage these things. The camera should be doing most of the work, not me. That's why I'm paying the money. Let the engineers figure that stuff out. You know, they're the smart ones. They're going to be able to, they should be able to figure that stuff out. I should be relying on the camera, not on me. And that's one less thing that I need to worry about. Because I'm telling you, with the Fuji in the past, again, the XH2, the XH2S, they look like great cameras. But there's still a lot of manual controls that you need to manage while you're using that particular camera. And at that price point, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But hey, what do I know? That's just me. I'm just one consumer. It just needs to, when I'm using it for personal use, and I don't have the time or really the interest in manually managing all of these things, I want the thing to just work for me. And that's exactly what this camera does. So, all right, let's wrap it all up. I've been talking for a little while here. There you have it. Those are my top 4 reasons for switching from Fujifilm to Sony. You've got the eye autofocus, which on Sony is just next level. You've got the RAW files, which can be easily manipulated within Lightroom. You've got incredible value, not only in the camera bodies, but the lenses. And fourth and finally, you've got very smooth auto exposure happening in really high dynamic range types of environments. Those are my thoughts. What do you think? I mean, what are some of the things that you are considering when making a switch from the different camera brands? Have you switched from Fujifilm to Sony? Have you made the switch from Sony to Fujifilm? I know there's some people that have gone that route because they just don't like perhaps the size of the camera gear as opposed to what you get with an APS-C sensor. So I know there's pluses and minuses to both. Today we were focusing on the pluses only with the Sony, and maybe in future videos we can talk about some of the disadvantages of this particular camera system as compared to the Fujifilm. But for today, we're going to keep it positive. We're going to end it there. If you did enjoy content like this, I just kindly ask that you smash the like button and also click the subscribe button down below to be notified of future videos. Thanks for watching. Take care.